So Metaphysics Rantscast, Metaphysician 7. Good morning, or afternoon, depending, as I always say whenever you guys hear this. Weekend was an interesting one from the standpoint of, being 100% engaged in activities, social activities that distracted myself, for the most part, from the digital world, and also scenarios that made me have to get outside my own head and outside of myself. And it's one of those, it's like after 3 days essentially of combination of family events and other social events, and also reconnecting with people but not foolish people, reconnecting with actual productive people who actually do things from the past. It's like former co-workers, quasi-co-workers, seeing where people are at career-wise, seeing where people have maybe pivoted, seeing where people have totally shifted their careers. It's like the normal conventional day-to-day world. I think it's also, again, this is also tied to the season. People come out of the woodworks a bit more in the June. I mean, we're already halfway through the year, right? This is crazy. I was telling someone, I'm like, yeah, I wonder what all the New Year's resolutioners, including myself, I don't even remember what my resolutions were, but you know what I mean? I guess I'm living them to some extent, but it's interesting with all the resolutioners. This is a yearly trend. You create a bunch of resolutions, then next thing you know, it's 6 months later, what's been done or what's been changed, because maybe you don't always want to stick to the same path or the same trajectory and so on and so forth. So anyway, so there was the gallery thing. I've already spoken about that, I think. Then there was the 1 minute. one second. Yeah, so Saturday was interesting. Saturday was this lecture on Atlantis. And now that I think about it, I've already published the entire there's nothing really to talk about now, but you guys heard the lecture. It's basically, the organization is this whole geophilosophy organization, the AGEAC. Again, the AGEAC stands for, this is what it stands for those of you who need a bit of a recap. The Geophilosophical Association of Anthropological and Cultural Studies. So they present themselves as a very, academic, educational, cross-discipline organization, which they are. But after after sitting through the lecture, first of all, you walk downstairs. It was a nice cross-section of individuals. They were kind of like from different age ranges. And you can tell there were some people that just kind of came in off the street. There was a bunch of young people, and when I say young, I mean like 20s, early 20s, maybe. People who looked like they were like on their way to party, you know what I mean? So there was kind of like a little like hipster contingent of people, and then there was some older, more academic looking types. There were some more new age-ish kind of people. There was like maybe people looked like kind of they were homeless and Skid Row-ish kind of people. You know what I mean? It was just like, I'm just saying, there's a cross section of people across the board. Then there was me. Someone came with their little kid. You know what I mean? It had an angle of new age philosophy to it. Basically, the lecture aimed to, and this is from how I summarized it. They aimed to position Atlantis as this historical city because they presented evidence. They presented pictures of roads underneath in that area of the Atlantic Ocean. They presented video evidence, photo evidence. I guess there's this uncovering. They've uncovered like a whole amount of archaeological, digs and finds that support the actual theory that it did exist. And they were also making connections between where in different mythology and where in different folklore does Atlantis kind of pop up throughout history. So the Bible, Eastern Asian traditions, South American traditions. You heard it. I'm not going to recap the whole thing. You guys heard the recording. And then also they were basically, as you also heard, kind of taking shots at the theory of evolution and Charles Darwin. So it was an interesting little lecture. I went in almost kind of green to the whole. Like I said, I've Wikipedia Atlantis. I've watched one or two documentaries here and there. I've never really sat on my own and made the connection between like the different parts of the world, from the historical context and where the myth or the story kind of pops up across different parts of the world. But I remember thinking the whole time, like, because at some point people started to leave. Now some people, maybe they just weren't interested. So maybe some people picked up on the whole new age kind of a vibe, and people bounced. And I think there's this, even in this kind of like spiritual awakening and spiritual enlightenment, because this organization also, and you know what's interesting too, they actually have, so they have like I don't know if it's a center of some kind, or they do meetings like maybe 2-3 streets away from me in my neighborhood, because I noticed that the concentration of flyers was very strong in my area, and I'm like, I wonder why. But judging from the site, there was nothing to really identify. Well, there's a lot of text. It's one of those kind of sites that has a lot of text. So maybe I just kind of skimmed over it. But turns out that I guess they do meditation and so on, and around the area here. But I think they also, it's a very spiritual, and they focus a lot on meditation and spiritual awakening and how to raise your consciousness and so on and so forth. I actually walked by a bunch of posters where they were where somebody had basically just written all over the poster saying these people are a cult and so on and so forth. Whether they are or they aren't, I don't know. Will I find out? Perhaps. Maybe I'll go. I mean, it's down the street. Maybe I'll go check it out once and see what they got to say as far as when they organize other events. I guess they're going to be doing more lectures at the library, so I may check out one or two. Again, this is all just this is all just something to do that is not entirely focused on partying. Then over the weekend too, there was a visit to I think I've spoken about this, to the dying. Well, everybody's dying. We're all dying, but specifically aging family member. Dude was a professor of history in Kenya. This is like my Sierra Leonean side of the family, and he's kind of in a home right now. And we went and just hung out with him for an hour, maybe not even an hour, because I mean, this is the thing. When somebody, first of all, I'm his he's like my great uncle, basically. So, and I had a period where like I was helping him out every single week, multiple times a week. Even though I'm not really I'm not his son, I'm not his, I'm his blood relative and he's in my city, but I'm not really like, he's got kids, right? And he has his own line of his family. Anyway, So we went, and it was like a very somber, kind of sad. I mean, I shouldn't say sad because there was a lot of jokes cracked, but the whole concept of the dying and the being left in a home, not necessarily to rot, but knowing that that's like the final destination, basically the final stop, the journey of life. And listening to, it's like he's at a stage where he's created maybe not necessarily created a world in his mind, but he's definitely bouncing between decades and years and periods and countries. 1 minute he's here, the next minute he's in Freetown, the next minute he's in Kenya, sometimes he's in England. Sometimes his wife, my great aunt, has been dead for maybe 7-8 years. He still thinks she's alive, which is is good for him, if him thinking she's there. But it's just a general state of confusion, right? It's dementia. It's that time in your life where you're 92, right? So there's that. Saw him. Went to this. I know this is just this is almost like an audio kind of a vlog of the day-to-day bullshit of my life, but I'm just saying that you got to focus on these little events sometimes, these little scenarios, these little daily grindish situations, because these things, maybe you ignore them when you're whether you're working or whether you are somebody who's more, I like to keep to myself-ish. Give me 1 second. Yeah, basically, sorry, I'm back. Basically, as you can tell, the moral of the story there was, don't be too quick to view the day-to-day, whether it's social gatherings or family things, as kind of a nuisance. I know there's people listening to this who, this is their kind of philosophy, is you keep to yourself, really. And so anything that forces you to actually have to go outside of yourself becomes perceived as an annoyance. But I rather enjoyed a lot of this stuff, having very specific objectives that had nothing to do with me, that had nothing to do with anything I was trying to do, in my life. It was just 100% about, social, I don't want to use the term social gatherings again. It's basically about community kind of gatherings that allow you to get kind of a glimpse into the window of other people's lives. So after this great uncle family thing, from there was this was like a quasi-formal, I said swanky in another episode, I guess maybe the last episode. It was swanky-ish, it was formal-ish. It was like a fundraiser for this initiative. From what I gather, they're trying to introduce programs that help young boys stand up whenever they see violence against women or see violence or sexual harassment in public. So it's like a training course of sorts for young people, for young boys. And so they had this fundraiser in this baller atmosphere downtown, close to City Hall. And there was a harpist, somebody who was kind of classically trained in a variety of instruments, whether it was English horn, oboe, recorder, clarinet. And then there was a dude playing kind of banjo and string instruments. It was more like a folk kind of a thing. And it was a very old kind of a seniors crowd. Most of the people there were in the senior range. There was a few young people, one of which I actually worked with 3 years ago during the federal election, and reconnected with her. She was cool. She kind of pivoted in her career I guess her career is really taking off from a standpoint of fundraising and so on. And anyway, I guess the moral of what I'm trying to get at with that whole little sub rant was even that initiative there, like that fundraising event, being in the presence of so many, I don't want to say ballers, but people who are more like accomplished in their own careers and established in their own careers, and they've accomplished many things in their own lives. It gave me a bit of I don't want to say, motivation or anything like that, but it kind of gave me first of all, it was definitely a good networking opportunity to get my name out there a bit. I was the dedicated photographer, also recorded some audio, so I got to produce something for them. So again, something outside of yourself that has nothing to do with you specifically, just doing a service for somebody else. And I also wanted to say, as far as it being a quote-unquote swanky baller kind of a thing, there's something to be said for when you're constantly engaging with people who are maybe somewhat in the same position of life as you, or maybe not much higher, not much lower. You're all in the general ballpark. I don't want to say it creates this kind of like echo chamber of maybe not crabs in a bucket, but definitely you don't expand your horizons, right? And it has nothing to do with the age specifically. Like even the former quote-unquote colleague or quote-unquote co-worker, seeing them kind of on an upward path, you're like, good. You know what I mean? Like, goddamn, sometimes you hear everybody's story becomes so whether you're on a notch of a downtrodden skid row notch, and then maybe the next step up is you're all somewhat quasi you're trying to legitimize yourselves through menial sub-level, low-level work. So those are the people that you interact with constantly, and you're all kind of like, I mean, maybe it is crabs in the bucket. Maybe it is. Maybe that's what it is. It's a crabs in the bucket kind of a thing. Because what happens when you're dealing with these other higher, quote-unquote higher class people who have way more disposable income, people who don't have to worry about, like, they could be in Peru at the drop of a hat. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Everybody there had this like well-traveled, traveled extensively, and so on and so forth. So it makes you kind of think bigger than what you're doing. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, maybe I should think. It's kind of like this. It's like envisioning success, right? Envisioning success. Creating a script for oneself that isn't so poverty mentality. I think I've also had this poverty mentality 0 out of 10 theme throughout this show. This was probably throughout the series of Rantcast episodes. This was definitely there was no poverty mentality happening here. It's like, let's all eat expensive, chocolate and weird like pastries. And at one point I was assigned to like pop various like bottles of booze, which I hadn't done in a while, so I felt weird because I you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, we're gonna pop champagne right now. I'm like, I haven't touched a bottle of booze in 2.5 years. This is gonna be interesting. But I mean, nobody cares, right? This is the other thing. People that high up I know there's this perception that rich people judge others. But because I was in the presence of them, because I was there specifically for the event, you almost become, I know maybe it's weird to put it like this, but you almost become one of them. You know what I mean? In the same way that you become one of the downtrodden when you're downtrodden. You become skid row or fiendish when you're interacting with those people. When you're constantly hanging around people that work out or whatever, that's what you kind of become. When you become, you become a fitness person. When you're hanging around a bunch of musicians and you even have an inkling of musical talent or whatever, that becomes the sort of environment you identify with. You know what I mean? I mean, maybe that's not, maybe I didn't articulate that well, but the point still stands. You know, you hang around successful people, you're gonna eventually envision success, and you're gonna start to think a little bit differently. You know what I mean? And I guess it started. You see what I'm saying? Like, it started with a random invite to the gallery, going to the gallery, and the gallery doesn't necessarily only attract quote unquote ballers and rich people, but it's definitely more cultured kind of an environment than, say, going to the McDonald's across the street to hijack the Wi-Fi. You know what I'm saying? Oh my god. Or like going to second, even within the coffee world or the restaurant world, it's like second cup in McDonald's is very different, very different clientele. You know what I mean? Hanging out at second cup is a whole different experience than hanging out at McDonald's. That's the simplest way to put it. You know what I mean? Anyway, am I coming up to the end here? Almost. So I guess some final thoughts on the whole weekend. And then, the seniors thing, like he's senile, the great uncle. He's senile and maybe has dementia now. But at one point he was balling. He's still balling technically. I mean, he might not have quotes going on, but his financial situation is the same, technically, theoretically. So, again, the weekend of not the post-crisis prevention and then being quasi-catapulted into this other universe and world of successful people, or people who are on the road to increased success, maybe rewired a bit of the thinking. Beyond I don't know how the reception to all these social service kind of narrations seems to be going. I'm on the way to the health center right now to go grab a bunch of the pamphlets so I can read them. Kind of, treat some of the episodes of the Rantcast to do a bit more good than just have the anecdotal stories of how I've overcome shit. Anyway, have a good rest of your day, folks. Peace.